Welcome to the Putback here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, host of the show. We're going to be breaking things down, Knicks-Celtics, for the next half hour or so. I've got two fantastic guests to do it with me. Marc Berman, longtime Knicks scribe from the New York Post, now living the good life in Florida. We miss him, but he still chimes in from time to time on his Twitter account. He's got his Relax Berman shirt on, and Sean Grande, voice of the Boston Celtics, and a very, very nice voice, if I may say so myself. I love hearing you call games, Sean, and also a native New Yorker. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But as always, we're going to get started with the baseline. Knicks, Game 1 in Boston, pulling off a very surprising comeback. And a surprising result, Knicks down 20 mid-third quarter, come all the way back from 20 points down, lose the lead again, and then make the plays when they needed to make the plays. Late in the fourth quarter and overtime. And, Sean, I want to start with you, because we were both there last night. Did you think this was the Celtics just shooting themselves in the foot? Did you think this was the Knicks' execution? Where do you lie on that?
Well, if it was the Celtics shooting themselves in the foot, they would have missed. They missed somebody else that they shot in the game. I thought it was a combination of things. It was the Celtics having one of those nightmare outlier nights where they just can't make a shot, and you're doing it against the wrong dude leading the wrong team on the other side. Because, as I kept saying, as the lead was dwindling down in the third quarter into the fourth, all the Knicks need here is to get to the ninth inning and to bring Mariano Rivera in the game. And he's going to close it because that's what he's been doing for 2 years. So you beg the Knicks to get back in the game. I think what is more remarkable is not that the Knicks came from 20 points down, is that the Celtics were up by 20 in the first place, as poorly as they were playing.
I agree. I didn't think that Boston played particularly well, and it was surprising to see the Knicks there. I mean, especially because you could check off some of the boxes for the Knicks of the things that they hadn't gotten in the past that they were looking for, particularly Miles McBride scoring. But then, obviously, Mark, they come storming back. And just from your spot where you were watching the game, 20 points down, what were you thinking at that time?
From my spot in Florida, I was thinking we've seen this show many times before. The Celtics were not playing well and were still up 20 points. I couldn't believe they were still up 20. But the big takeaway and the good news for Celtics fans, if there are any Celtics fans watching, is you miss a playoff record 45 three-pointers and you still lose in the final seconds of overtime. So I think that's and then Porzingis, I don't know what the reporting is today, but I thought they really did miss Porzingis. I know he didn't look good in the first half, maybe because he was sick. But, I mean, he gives them another dimension. When he would have hit a few threes, and maybe one or two threes would have got everyone else going. And I feel Derek White is such a glue piece. He's killed the Knicks in the first 4 regular season games. And right from the opening possession, he bricked a three-pointer. He was, I think, 5 of 16 from three-point range, took the most three-pointers for the Celtics. When he's not hitting, I feel when he's hitting, it gets everyone else going. He's that type of energizer, and he was just god-awful. Listen, if you're a Celtic fan, you got to say we're not missing 45 three-pointers in Game 2.
Interesting thing for me, Mark and Sean, was something happened with the Knicks last night that you didn't see a lot during the season, and that was guys outside of Jalen Brunson coming through in really big spots, and really many different players outside of Brunson making big plays down the stretch. Because Brunson, yes, certainly Mariano Rivera up here in the NBA, but last night in that overtime, a couple turnovers, a couple missed shots, uncharacteristic, and it was OG Anunoby, and it was Mikal Bridges, and it was, Karl Towns with a tip, and it was other guys making big plays. And to me, that bodes well for a team that really, I think, is at its best when everyone is kind of engaged and involved, particularly because that gets them engaged on the defensive end. Sean, the third quarter, I think you had it at 19 of 20 shots for the Celtics were threes. Do you see the Knicks? I mean, they switched a lot, and they like what happened there. Do you see the Knicks doing anything special to take things away from the Celtics to make it difficult from them, or were they just missing open looks?
They were largely missing open looks, but I've been doing this a long time. I had to stop in between quarters. I was staring at the box scores and doing the math, and I'm like, well, that's 19 out of 10. And my mind wouldn't accept it. I'd never seen anything like it. I'm staring. I literally checked. I never check my math. I'm checking my math 2-3 times. Like 19, subtract the 9. They can't have just taken 19 out of 20. And then those were the actual numbers. I think when you look at it today, and now we have all the tracking data and all the advanced stuff that we can look at and see how many of them were considered open or wide open. And the Celtics literally, it was like every other game against New York, the 4 games in the regular season, the Celtics had 27 what were considered wide open 3-pointers.
Wow.
And not only, which is insane, and I think they only made 6, 7, or 8 of them, something like terrible. And they shot below 30% on wide open threes, which is a 45% shot in the NBA, and particularly for this team. And it's funny because we can sit here talking about the 45 threes that they missed, one of which would have avoided overtime, or we can talk about a guy who was 7'3", missing 3 consecutive second-grade layups. That was 2 points right there. That changes the entire course of the game. So, was it something the Knicks were doing specifically? I thought the Knicks. I'll say this: I think the Knicks have to be better defensively and not give the Celtics as many open threes as they did. I think they can be better. That's the good news for Knicks fans. And I'm glad you mentioned Anunoby, because I think something, nobody ever hears me when I say it, in my little dark corner of the world. But are we going to look back at the injury to Jalen Brunson and the minutes and the load that Anunoby carried late in the season as really being significant? And anyone who watched the Knicks in the second half of the year knows how good Anunoby was, efficient offensively and shooting the ball. But just his comfort offensively, he's always been great defensively, but his comfort offensively in the big moments, how much of that was because of the load he had to carry with Brunson out those last 15 games or whatever it was?
Yeah, Sean, it's an interesting point, and obviously Bridges and Anunoby had bigger roles when Brunson was out offensively, and then I thought that it was going to be tough for one or both of those guys to adjust once Brunson came back, but Anunoby continued to score the ball regularly at a high clip. And, of course, there were games where he had fewer shots or Bridges had fewer shots. But by and large, he continued to produce. Bridges was a little hit and miss. But to do what he did last night, 2 for 12 when he puts up that 3-pointer in overtime to get it to 106-100. And then the defensive plays we'll get into a little bit later. But, yeah, he showed me something because, Josh Hart always says Bridges gets criticized and it doesn't affect him at all. And I always wonder, is that true? But to see him do what he did last night, and to do what he did in that Detroit series, making big shots after struggling most of the game, I guess it is accurate. He just plays. He stays in the moment, and he's going to keep shooting and trying to make plays. Credit to him.
I defer to both of you guys on this, obviously. But here's what I was so happy for Bridges last night to get this sort of signature moment, because he sort of unwittingly has become the poster for what from afar feels like a disappointment among fans on last year's Knicks team, which everybody loved and was so close to the heart of the city, and what this year's team was going to be at the beginning, because Bridges was sort of this new face brought in. And the first game up here in Boston, everyone's complaining in the preseason about his shot, and all Bridges does is give you 40 minutes every single night. He's been an underrated defender in the league, and I think because of that perception of not being as happy with this year's team, which is all about expectations, because this statistically is the best Knicks team in the last 25 years. I think a lot of that gets put on Mikal Bridges, and for him to have a couple of signature moments and a couple of signature road wins for the Knicks, I think it's a real feel-good thing. I'm glad I can say things out loud here that I'm not allowed to say. People, by the way, I should point out, the nice thing in Boston is that Celtic fans are taking last night very well, very rationally, and very even-handed, and not at all panicking about the specter of what could happen here if this continues.
This is a great sports town. Sean, I was just thinking, if the roles were reversed and the Knicks had home court advantage and blew that lead,
sure,
somebody might have been fired that night. It would have just been a disaster. Mark,
you want the dark secret here for Celtic fans that they don't want to say out loud, that this Knicks team is better than any team the Celtics beat last year on their way to the championship.
Interesting. And the team's healthy right now, which,
right,
the narrative around Tom Thibodeau, you would think somebody at least would be banged up. Mark, if you're covering this game last night, TD Garden, you're in the locker room, Mikal Bridges is there. What are you asking him?
I mean, it felt like vindication for him. Even going back to the very first season opener when Mikal Bridges was sort of the poster boy for that blowout loss on opening night, he was very nervous. And just how he must feel after opening night and being sort of the GOAT of that first game of the season and to become the hero in overtime, because I thought he really was the hero. Brunson disappeared in overtime, and Bridges with this was the vision that Leon Rose had. Mikal Bridges stealing the ball from Jaylen Brown, not once but twice in overtime, and winning the game with one of them. Listen, his Iron Man streak is not talked about enough. In fact, I was disappointed here in Florida sports radio. It's more national shows out here. But they were criticizing Bridges, and I guess it became a national topic that Bridges came in for the opening tip and then came out in the last regular season game to keep his streak alive. So what? I mean, the point was he was healthy enough to play. So for him to miss the game just to rest for the playoffs would have, been misleading. So I didn't mind that at all. I just think his ability to play every single game of his NBA career is remarkable in this day and age of load management. And, and when you look at OG, listen, people kill me on social media because I was a little negative about OG and his arrival. He's an excellent ball player. I just am concerned about his durability. And he stayed healthy most of the season. And last night he did something I never saw him do before. He really... Listen, Jaylen had a wonderful fourth quarter, but it was OG who turned the game around also with his three-pointers and his fast break buckets and his energy on defense. I honestly never saw OG be that great and living up to his contract, because I always thought that contract was inflated.
He did everything for them in game one. And one more assist from Mikal Bridges, because the Knicks did, again, go to the layup lines coming out of halftime. That's something I think they started, must have been I want to say it was game 6 in Detroit, maybe a little bit earlier. And it's been working. I mean, they did guys got 2 layups in these layup lines. So it seems performative, but Bridges started it. I would assume they stick with it, but let's get into that comeback, Sean, that 31-11 run, and Brunson had his fingerprints all over that. What do you think wasn't happening in terms of what Boston has done consistently all year long that they weren't doing in that stretch? And what surprised you?
Well, I think when we talk about Porzingis not being there, there's 2 sides to this. It's interesting because on the one hand, and here's what nobody says out loud, the Celtics have played 77 games without Porzingis since he's been here. They're 62-15 in those 77 games. So obviously they were able to, and they won most of the playoff games without him last year. That said, he is uniquely suited and important in this matchup with the Knicks. And everyone talks about the offense and obviously being able to spread the floor. But defensively, that rim protection is critical. Luke Kornet has played well against the Knicks this year, but when you haven't had Porzingis, you know that you don't have Porzingis before the game. Let's go back to a part of the game that we would forget about normally, which was hacking Mitchell Robinson. Do the Celtics have Luke Kornet use up all his fouls in that spot if they know they're not going to have Porzingis in the second half? Because all these things sort of, blend together. And suddenly when you don't have the rim protection and Al Horford has been mind-bending for his age, what he's giving you on both ends of the floor. But particularly when you're not planning to have him play 36 or 38 minutes. You're not planning, especially as the Knicks are going to get him switched with Brunson. He's going to be in all of these actions defensively. You're not counting on it before the game. So to me, that was a big part of the 31-11 run, and the fact that the Knicks weren't just going to keep missing shots. The Celtics kept missing shots, and they had one of those nights, and the Knicks didn't. But I think we're in 2025. A 20-point lead. We have to be realistic that this is it's not the 20-point lead we all grew up with. When I first came in the NBA, a game was over. when it was 20. It was over. Now you're just looking up at the clock and going, if there's more than 4 or 5 minutes left, 20 points isn't safe.
It's true. No, it's a fair point. You brought up, Sean, Mitchell Robinson. Marc Berman's wearing his relax shirt, an ode to Mitchell Robinson, who famously said, "Relax, Berman," after Berman asked him a question about when the Knicks weren't playing well. Mark, with Mitchell Robinson, if you're a coach or you're with the Knicks, what are you saying to him? How are you getting him to shake loose here?
Yeah, listen, I covered Mitchell for many years, and just getting back to one other point about that run, and you mentioned about the rim protection for Porzingis, but the defensive rebounding for Boston was terrible. The Knicks finally looked like that offensive rebounding juggernaut. They were just knocking rebounds loose, back tapping it, grabbing it. Josh Hart, just a crazy man. And that's when I kind of went back to last season, and that's how successful the Knicks were in beating Philadelphia. And they were just wonderful on the offensive glass during that run, keeping balls alive. Mitchell Robinson came into the league as not a terrible three-point shooter. I mean, not a terrible free throw shooter, rather. His first year was 60%, and then it went downhill after that. His high school coach, who I spoke to many times, said he used to take three-point shots in high school. This is a mental block. He's changed his form many times, and I think he finished 68% this season, but it was a very, very, very small sample size as he missed most of the season. But this free throw shooting is all about mental, not physical. And if I'm Boston, if I have Porzingis healthy, I would try to do a little more of the Haka-Mitchell strategy. Right now, his mind is not right. It's sad to see him going from his rookie season, where he was also a putback guy, alley-oop guy in his first few years. And now I feel he's not even involved offensively with alley-oops. Like, Thibodeau has sort of ignored him, and I feel he's just not confident on any level on the offensive end. And there's just been a big regression with Mitchell offensively. Instead of a progression, which you would think from his rookie year, it's just gone downhill. And the Knicks don't have a shooting coach, really, I don't think, still. I mean, I remember writing in my final year in the beat about maybe they could have a shooting coach. But it's a real issue with Mitchell and the free throws, to a point where I was thinking last night, boy, I wonder if it's worth even having him on the floor. He is a plus 13, so I guess he gives space for the other guys to operate like Jalen. But that plus-minus stat is one of those weird stats where sometimes it's meaningful and sometimes it's not.
What is meaningful, though, Mark, is those offensive rebounds, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the reason. Joe Mazzulla wasn't hacking to play the normal offensive rating game where, okay, this guy's a 50% free throw shooter and giving up 1.1 points per possession. He wanted Mitchell Robinson off the floor because that was his concern was the defensive glass, particularly as the Celtics had to go smaller, and that is why the focus was on getting him out of the game, not getting him to miss free throws.
Right, and I thought, that last shot of regulation by Tatum, Robinson did a really good job contesting while staying under control and avoiding any contact. And I think he makes them so much better defending pick and rolls, which is something they've struggled with for much of the season. And also, if they're going to switch everything, he helps you to do that. So I think he still impacted the game. But the free throw thing, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I wouldn't see Sean Mazzulla going away from that if it worked so well for him in game one. You think we see that game two? And I'm not going to ask you how effective it's going to be, but do you think he sticks with it?
I think he does stick with it. Remember, there was a unique situation, too. The Celtics had a lot of team fouls early in that second quarter, so it almost, again, overused expression, perfect storm, but it almost came into play. The Celtics had 3 or 4 team fouls in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the second quarter, so that, combined with Mitchell Robinson being on the floor, allowed Joe Mazzulla. It was the perfect situation to try it, and obviously, since it worked, it's a club you've got in the bag to at least consider. But, again, depending on Porzingis and having him, I even said at the time, as it was going on, I said to Cedric Maxwell, my partner, who should Neemias Queta, if you're going to bring him in, if the Knicks are going to have use Precious Achiuwa, who didn't play against Detroit, can you bring Keita in to use up some of those fouls so you're not having Luke Cornett suddenly get into foul trouble when you got enough issues up front as it is?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting chess match, something interesting to watch for game 2. But, the regular season, as both you guys know well, Boston destroyed the Knicks in 3 games, and the last game the Knicks played them a little bit tighter. But in my mind, that's where your wings needed to show up. I mean, you spent the 5 first-round picks to get Bridges. You gave Anunoby the big contract. Your expectation was for these guys to play against the top wings in the league. It didn't happen against Boston in the regular season, but I think you'll also have to give these guys credit. I know we talked about it earlier, just the plays that they made late in this game. And Bridges, I think it probably got a little bit overshadowed, but he had a steal. I think he bothered Jaylen Brown's drive, and then Brown, I think, tried to pass to Horford on the perimeter. Bridges got his hand on it. It's going out of bounds. He saves it, gets it to Josh Hart. Hart finds Anunoby on that dunk for the N1. I think it put the Knicks up 103-100. And that's a play that probably gets overlooked. But for him to make that kind of play means so much, I think, to teammates and to the organization because of the way things didn't go as well as they had hoped, obviously, in the regular season. Do you need more from Bridges, though, Mark? What are your thoughts? Offensively, you need more. Can it be Bridges scoring, OG scoring, and Jaylen and Cat scoring? What are your thoughts there?
Right. Well, they obviously need Bridges to be this type of player, and that's why you give up 5 first-round picks. Listen, in the finals when he was with Phoenix, he did well. He hit some big shots. OG was saying after the game, we have a lot of, major playoff experience and cited Mikal in the finals with Phoenix. So they need Mikal and OG to do exactly what they did. Then it doesn't matter about Josh Hart. Then Josh Hart can just be that crazy, energizing, offensive rebounding scrapper who once in a while will get a bucket driving downhill. But they won't need him to hit a three-point shot. If OG is that confident from three-point land, Bridges could knock in a three-pointer and play that type of defense, then it's not all about Jaylen. And we haven't even talked about Cat. Listen, Cat had that foul trouble in the first half, and then he struggled to start the third quarter a lot. He was so out of rhythm. But that tip-in, you don't see those type of tip-ins that often. I mean, in the middle of overtime, that was a huge bucket for him to tip that ball in. And they'll need Cat, who didn't shoot many three-pointers at all last night. There is a lot on paper, but the problem with the Knicks is it's been so much about living and dying with Jaylen. And last night, when Jaylen went, I think, 0 for 5 in overtime or 0 for 4 in overtime, everyone else stepped up. And obviously in regulation during that run, Miles McBride was, I think, there at the beginning of the run, hitting a couple of big threes. So there is enough on paper to give Boston a battle. But too often it just becomes the Jaylen show, and that's just not good enough. And Jaylen said after the game, we have a lot more. And unfortunately, in the Pistons series, it really did seem like it was all about Jalen Brunson, and that's not how you beat the Celtics.
And, we talked to Josh Hart today, and he mentioned he was answering a question about OG and Anunoby, and he said, I think we should get Mikal and OG involved a little bit more often. He said, I know that it starts with Jaylen and it starts with Karl Towns, but he did say, I think we should look to those guys a little bit more. And Sean, when you said that this Knicks team is better than any team that Boston beat last year in the postseason, is that accounting for strong play from Anunoby and Bridges making the kind of plays he made last night, or is that based on those guys being hit or miss?
Well, it's based on the fact that this team was largely put together to defend teams like the Celtics with Tatum and Brown, that you're bringing Anunoby and you're bringing Bridges here for just this purpose. I mean, it was the dream scenario. This is, listen, I grew up as a Knicks fan. If you're a Knicks fan today, you shouldn't be thinking about the fact that all of these things, that Anunoby was amazing and that Bridges made those plays and that the Celtics had a terrible three and it needed overtime, right? Just enjoy this moment and enjoy these 48 hours, because I think, as you said, Mark, you're exactly right. And doing all my hot take theater stuff before the series, how can the Knicks win the series? How can they make this competitive? It was about, can Karl Anthony Towns be the third best player in the series. He has to be. And one of the many, many, many things that got erased because of the way the game unfolded last night is the fact that he was rolling when he got that third foul. The story of the game, the Celtics hit a couple of more shots and they win the game by 8 or 10 in regulation, and all this 45 missed three stuff goes away, and the entire talking points are different today, we would be addressing Karl Anthony Towns starting to roll, getting that third foul, and never really getting back into the rhythm of the game until obviously it was close, at the end. But I think the reality is, the Celtics got derided last year for winning the championship against teams, even though Denver the year before had beaten 2 8 seeds, right, to win the championship. Nobody cares when you're, no kid in Toronto takes his poster down when he thinks, oh, Klay Thompson was hurt and Kevin Durant got hurt in that series. That doesn't count. And, Mike Malone wasn't going to not dance at the parade because they beat 2 8 seeds. Yeah, Donovan Mitchell got hurt. Jimmy Butler didn't play the first round. The Celtics were going to win last year, no matter what and no matter who they played. That was their year. Things obviously this year are a lot more wide open. And you can make an argument the way Dallas was playing last year that maybe Dallas by June last year was better than the Knicks are playing right now. But I'm just not sure. I get that the Knicks bench here, we're talking about 9 through 12 and getting through, but we're not anymore. This is what this team was designed to do, was to have 7, 8 guys you could count on to have a chance in series. The only trouble with the Knicks this year to me is that it was the wrong year to be the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference. It was the wrong year to be the 5th or 6th best team in the NBA because you had 3 teams at an absolutely historic level. And there was this cloud over the New York season that got to Game 7 of the second round last year. Could that even happen again? Because the odds of the Knicks getting to Game 7 of the second round a month ago, not last night, not anymore, not today, weren't great. So there was always that feeling that, we're the 3rd best team in the East. But this was, enjoy the fact that for 24, 48 hours here, you get to enjoy exactly what the vision of this New York team was. And who knows? Lightning can strike more than once.
Sean Grande, voice of the Boston Celtics, grew up in New York, grew up a Knicks fan. Who was your favorite Knick growing up, Sean?
Well, my Knicks, my Knicks were the late 70s, early 80s, but my Knicks were the ones trying to get into the lottery to get Patrick Ewing. I'm like Rory Sparrow is my Knick, that's my Knick child. And as I spent all of last night talking about 1984, it's the first time, the second round, blah, 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 since I remember the pain in my stomach as an 11-year-old or however old I was when Larry got the MVP and not Bernard. I carried that bitterness with me, because I'm a guy who not only grew up in New York, I hated Kevin McHale. And as it turns out, my 2 jobs in the NBA, my first one was working with Kevin McHale doing TV in Minnesota when I was in my 20s. That was my first job in the league. And, of course, my first line of my obituary is going to be long time. That's what the kids like to say now to make me feel old, including my son. Long time, boys of the So, yeah, life is, long way from Greenwich Village. But I, can't wait. Listen, there's very few people who are more excited, are going to be more excited at 3:30 Saturday afternoon than to be where I'm going to be with, the environment. It was going to be great anyway. But now with the Knicks coming back with at least 1 game, it's going to be wild.
Yeah, it should be fun. I mean, you referenced, Sean, Knicks playing for the lottery. Mark, how many times was the most important story of our season who the Knicks were sending at the dais for that lottery drawing? It was the biggest story. We all wanted to break it. That was the most important thing of the year.
And could you
how many phone calls I had to make just to find out who's on the dais?
Yeah, that's right. And we in the 9-piece epic documentary, the Celtic City thing, it just aired on HBO. There's like the famous dais shot. There's only one, like the ML car sitting there in '97 when the Celtics didn't get Tim Duncan, and that's like the one lottery moment. And again, it is the duality here. And I can't sit here and preach to Celtic fans who want what they want and love what they love. The idea that what we're talking about here and telling the story of the series is that Jaylen Brown was 3 years old the last time the Knicks were in the conference finals. And if the Celtics win this series, Jaylen Brown will be playing in his 7th conference finals in 9 years. 7. This is just greed at this point when the Knicks haven't been there in 25 years. And it's a generation that you have to understand, why do people hate Boston? This is why. 6 Super Bowls, 4 World Series, 2 NBA championships, a Stanley Cup, And suddenly the standard from when I first came back from Minnesota to come to the Celtics, they hadn't been in the playoffs in 6 years. It was such loserville around here. Mm-hmm. They literally had a parade in Boston for a player who won a championship in another city. Ray Bork won the Stanley Cup in Denver, and they had a parade for him here because everyone was so stoked for a championship. A generation later, if you're under 35 years old in Boston, you haven't lived. You don't know what life is like. You don't know what the suffering is like. Literally, let's do a little show and tell. My childhood, this is it. This is my ticket.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
This is my ticket to Game 6 in 1986 when my joyful night, as a lifelong Mets fan, was, the ultimate suffering of Red Sox fans. And that was what they dealt with here for years and years and years. And now an entire generation for 25 years knows nothing but when I first came back here, my first year with the Celtics, they went to the conference championship. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2002. They wanted to have a parade for that team. Now, if the Celtics lose in the Eastern Conference Finals this year, last year, a couple of years ago, that's, what kind of season was that?
Right. People are calling for somebody to be fired or somebody to be traded. And
it's just that. I mean, listen, Joe Mazzulla today no longer knows how to coach. He is the winningest coach in the history of the NBA in the regular season and the playoff. Okay. He literally knows nothing about coaching today. Yesterday he was brilliant. And maybe by 10 o'clock tomorrow night, everything will be fine again. But that's the nature of the animal. And I think a lot of Boston, New York stuff was jarred in people here by what happened in Game 1. That all of a sudden nobody considered here losing to the Knicks. Now you have to face that reality for 48 hours at least of, oh my gosh, what will happen? Not that it necessarily will happen, but if it does, what is my life as a Boston fan going to be like if the Celtics lose to the Knicks? What are my text messages going to look like? What's my voicemail going to look like? And God forbid. So the last time there was a significant New York win over Boston, when we talk about Aaron Boone, like what do we, you have the giant Super Bowl. Social media is what it is now. So all of a sudden that is there. And there's a lot of inferiority complex going through the playoff run last year about what if this goes wrong? Because the Celtics had gotten so close and not gotten there. And Tatum can't win a big one. These guys can't. And that scarred people here until they actually won. So I think last night sort of jarred them out of the slumber a little bit.
Well, good. Because we want Knicks fans on both sides. Go ahead, Mark.
Meanwhile, Knicks fans, if they took the Celtics to 7 games, they'd want a banner, hang a banner up, and the Garden.
And it's more like
Boston to 7 games.
You don't have to be the voice of the Celtics or a lifelong Knicks fan or someone living in Omaha and know that the NBA is just a more fascinating place when the Knicks are relevant and when Madison Square Garden is hopping the way it is. It's just the world is a better place. And the NBA is a better place, and the sport's in a better place when that happens. So in the big picture, regardless of what happens in the series, the Knicks are back, and that's a good thing for everybody.
You guys remind me of when the Knicks dropped streamers and balloons down when they beat the Heat in the series that they went on to lose, I think 4-1. They won a game at the Garden. They celebrated. And then, Mark, as you know, there is a division title banner hanging at Madison Square Garden. So those two things make you shake your head. We're going to get into what we learned now, gentlemen. What we learned is presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. Mark, you tweeted yesterday before the game, and this is not to hang you out to dry. Knicks will win Game 3 at the Garden, Celtics in 5. Then there will be, as Begley might say, some hard conversations within Team Brass. Hashtag how you. Let's start here with Tom Thibodeau because I thought he really coached a fantastic game, and he had great moments in that Detroit series too. What did you think, Mark, of Thibodeau last night? And also, what would you ask him? Again, if you're sitting in that post-game press conference, he grumbles, yes, Berman. What would you ask him?
Well, first, regarding that Binghamton ad, I think there was also a study that Albany State actually was number one over Binghamton. I think there was another study there. But anyway, I thought Thibodeau made a big mistake in the first half when Towns had 3 fouls during the crazy Boston run where they built a nice big halftime lead. There weren't enough timeouts, and I thought he should have put Towns back in the game with maybe 2 minutes left to see if they could get back into the game. Now it doesn't matter. Towns came back in the third quarter. He looked awful. But, ultimately Tibbs coached a great game in terms of, keeping Bridges out. Listen, Bridges, he knows Bridges complained about too many minutes for the starters. I guess Bridges played 51 minutes last night, and thank God he did. So, listen, Thibodeau is going to play the guys he feels are producing and are going to play well defensively. And he kept Bridges out there for a monster amount of time. And I'm not saying that Thibodeau has saved his job no matter what happens the rest of the way. But I feel if the Knicks could squeak out one more victory in this series, I don't know if those hard conversations, as Begley might point out, are going to take place. You know that Leon Rose loves Thibodeau, and there's pressure from outside of the Leon's brain to maybe make a move if the Knicks get massacred by Boston, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It looks like these games might be competitive. If the Knicks take Boston to 6 games and most of the games are competitive, I don't see a move. And I don't think, Ian, a lot better. You're texting, Leon every day. So I just feel that Thibodeau may have saved his job last night with an incredible Game 1 victory. He needs another one, but I think the heat is off.
Yeah, this is not based on reporting, but I do agree with you, Mark. I think if it plays out the way you described, no need to make any kind of a change. But right now, we're going to take some fan questions in a session that we like to call the Talkback. And my friend and yours, Matt Spenley, the Big Spend, will lead us here. He's going to relay a few questions from the audience, and we're going to see what we have.
What's up, guys? Sean, I want to start with you. Just a general kind of thing about the series is what's going on with Porzingis? I know you mentioned, obviously, the Celtics' success without him, and it's been a little bit, there's an illness is why he said he was out of the game yesterday. What could we expect from him the rest of the series, and kind of what's the status if you have any extra information?
Well, the reporting this afternoon is basically that, he's under the weather and that he's really been day to day, that he's fought through it, that he's been trying to feel better. He had this in April. He missed a lot of games, and it was getting to the point of, all right, this is odd now. This is troubling that he's continuing to miss games, over and over. And we thought that it went away, but as we all know, it's cold and flu season. When you're a kid, you get better in a day or two and you feel better, right? Your kid one day is lying on the couch and he can't move, and then the next day he's up jumping around. And the older we get, the longer stuff lingers. So obviously, whatever it is, respiratory or not, it's been lingering, and it's a legitimate problem. As I mentioned, knowing you're not going to have Porzingis versus Porzingis being completely ineffective and maybe not having him in the second half, those are two different things. And the latter is actually more troubling and has been for the Celtics.
For sure. And obviously Hauser yesterday also left the game with history, so we'll see how that plays out. Mark, I got to go to you because we know famously you're on the Knicks beat for a long time. A lot of discussion. This is the best Knicks playoff win since blank. Give me your answer.
Wow. You really have to go. This not in the 2000s. This has shocked the entire NBA. Naturally, Cleveland lost and Oklahoma City lost, but you probably have to go to the 1999 run when they made it to the finals. One of the victories, you don't want to say the Indiana, Game 6 or whatever, but in the entire 2000s, I can't remember one victory that is that relevant. But I will have to say, if Boston goes on and wins it in 6 or in 5, then the historic nature of last night lessens. So that's a tricky question. But right now, Everyone's talking about it. Many, if not a sweep, some people thought 5 games. The most 6 games. I don't think I ever saw a 7-game prediction, and I didn't see any expert pick the Knicks to win this series. So throughout the 2000s, I listen. They beat Boston in the first round, back in that Carmelo year, but they were kind of favored. They had a great regular season. So throughout the 2000s, I don't remember one terrific playoff victory as shocking as this one.
Yeah, and from that series, too, the Knicks had that Game 6 win in Boston that the Celtics almost came back, Jeff Green in that series. So that was a nail-biter.
That's good. We mentioned that last night as it was happening. The Knicks, that wasn't a fool's gold comeback. The Knicks were up by like 24-26, and I think that was Avery Bradley. Yeah. The Celtics got that to about 4, and it wasn't like with 30 seconds left. They got it to 4 with about 3 or 4 minutes left, but that was the Knicks who came in. Remember, the Knicks have a history of eliminating the Celtics in Boston. 73 in the Game 7 in the conference finals to go to the finals to eventually beat the Lakers and win the championship. 1990, Patrick Ewing, they eliminated the Celtics at Boston Garden. And that game you just talked about in 2013 ended the Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Doc Rivers, new Big 3 era. That was the end of that.
Yep, and we'll see how this one ends this year. Obviously, a lot of series to go. Like Mark said, I think Game 1 in some ways might be defined by how the series goes. Ian, I want to end with you here just because you wrote last night after the game about Mikal Bridges. I know obviously we've talked about him, but I also want to give you the chance to talk about what that meant for him. Josh Hart talked about it post-game, just being there, being in the locker room, hearing the way that Hart and other Knicks have talked about Bridges all season long, having a huge playoff moment, winning them that game in overtime. Your thoughts on Mikal and what you heard the team say?
Yeah, I think, Josh has been there to defend and make strong statements about Mikal all year long. I mean, going back to the opener against Boston, he said, Mikal's going to be fine. He works hard. We see him work hard. We know he's going to be fine. We're not worried about it at all, kind of sending a message to the fans and media that, Mikal is going to weather this storm, and they have confidence in him and kind of telling everybody to back off. Well, nobody really listened. The media and the fans, I think, took Bridges and his daily or game-by-game performance as a barometer of the trade every day. And they looked at, what you gave up for Bridges, and it's fair to look at it that way. But if you're going to look at it that way, you have to then look at Game 6 against Detroit, where he goes 11 for 16, 25 points, just a remarkable performance, very good on defense as well, helps them close that series out. And then don't look at the box score from Game 1. Look at what he did late in this game, and the 5 picks are gone. And that's how you're going to judge the trade. That's how it works in pro sports. But Knicks aren't getting the 5 picks back, so I think to them, what can he do for you to help you win games right now? And he did it, Game 1. And obviously they need some more from him offensively. But as far as how it impacted him, I mean, I get the sense that he's not a player who's going to get impacted by criticism, by praise. Seems to me that he stays pretty even keel based on, his play and also based on just being around, talking to him in these interviews. It seems like he just doesn't care. He just stays locked in on what he needs to do, which is probably a good trait here in New York, or if you're playing in Boston and in a passionate sports town like these two.
Totally fair. All right, that's what I got, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Big Spend. We are going to wrap here, guys, but just real quick, final thoughts. X factor for Game 2, Marc Berman, what do you have?
Yeah, it's about Boston hitting the 3-point shot, Derek White returning back to form. My cat is starting to really attack me for food now, but I'll wrap it up. I think Boston wins by double digits. I think they'll hit the threes. We'll have KP, not we, but the Celtics will have KP back, I would imagine, and that's going to help them. I can't see the Knicks. I can't see the Knicks going up 2-0. I just can't. Boston will be back to their prior 3-point shooting form.
Sean, X factor for you going to Wednesday.
Well, let's see if Mark's cat is not the only one that's hungry. Because if we see that's what we do. Well, you're going to get the Karl Anthony Towns that we saw in the first half, because he's going to, at some point, he is going to have to assert himself in the series the way I thought he was at the start of game number 1. I think that's significant. It goes without saying that the Knicks cannot give the Celtics 27 wide open threes in every game, or this could take an ugly turn. But I think the Knicks can be better defensively, and they will, but they're going to have to, because outlier shooting nights happen, but we call them outlier shooting nights because they're outliers, and they only happen once every 4 or 5 games.
Sean Grande, voice of the Boston Celtics. Marc Berman, longtime beat reporter, NBA reporter for the New York Post. Again, now living the good life down in Florida. Really appreciate you guys. Really appreciate your time and your insights. And that's going to do it for us here on the Putback. We will be back with you later in this postseason at some point in this series to break things down, talk about what happened, talk about what's coming next. And we look forward to seeing you then.